The topic, as I said, is that the complaints that our young adults face from the parents. The first complaint, which I often find youngsters facing from their parents, is that parents at times don't realize that they argue between one another. The father and the mother would be arguing, would be fighting, would be picking each other's faults without realizing that their children are around. And I do advise parents that this should not happen. This should not happen, that when you are actually with your children and the children are around you, you start fighting with each other, you start arguing with each other. Of course, wherever two people live, or even more than two people, there's bound to be a difference of opinion. There's bound to be some this point of dispute. But the thing is that if a father and a mother have some dispute between themselves, then ideally this dispute or this difference of opinion should be solved in their own bedroom, in their own time, without coming in front of their children. I have seen very intense quarrels between husband and wife, and I've seen their children witnessing those faults, and it has a terrible effect on the children, terrible effect on the minds of the children. If I was a child, if I was a young adult like you, and if I would see my mother and father fighting with each other every now and then, my confidence in the institution of marriage would be shaken to the ultimate, and I would perhaps end up saying that I'm not going to marry if this is what marriage means. And this intensifies when the whole issue becomes a family feud. And how does it become a family feud? It becomes a family feud when the father at times takes the children into confidence, maybe the son, and the mother takes the daughter into her confidence, and they start forming a whole group. So on one side we have one child with a parent, then we have another child with the other parent, and the parents think that by confiding the child the problem that he or she has experienced with the opposite spouse, he or she would be able to win the support of their child. Now this is even worse than before, and it's even worse than the fact that you're fighting between each other, and the worst thing is that you are actually inclining or trying to win over one of the children towards yourself and create a lot of rift in the family, not only between the spouses, but of course if this happens, this rift is extended to the children as well. So the first point of caution is, and the first mistake, as I said, I would be delivering this as in the form of a complaint from young adults. The first complaint of the young adults is that the parents must not pick faults, must not quarrel with each other in front of their children. True that they might be having differences, but then those differences should be worked behind doors. They should be worked out through a conflict resolution strategy which can be suggested to them. The second complaint which young adults have with their parents is that they have these taunting comparisons to make. Like, for example, I will compare my child to some other child, maybe, or even to another child of mine, who would be more bright or more skillful or more tactful. And that is that I would taunt one of my children by saying that, look, you're just a dunce, you're just a thick-headed idiot, and look at that, look at your elder brother, or look at your elder sister, or look at your cousin, or look at your neighbor, how proficient they are, how skillful they are, how intelligent they are, how hardworking they are. So without realizing the fact that this really plays havoc, it really plays havoc on the psyche of the children. When you start comparing children, it does no good to them. You see, what needs to be done is that children should be compared to other children so that they get motivated, and that is a healthy comparison. But this does not happen. What happens is that taunting comparison, in which you taunt a child, you taunt your own child, and start comparing him or her with other children. And I can imagine the amount of agony which a child would go through when he is told that how slow he is or she is, he's or she's a slow learner. You see, parents don't realize that if a person is a slow learner or there is something wrong in his studies, there is a fault somewhere, because you see, no child is geared towards such things in which every child finds himself or herself to be cornered in studies. There is something wrong somewhere. Either the teacher is not teaching that child properly, either he's having attention deficit problems, either he or she thinks the subject that he or she is being forced to learn is not his or her cup of tea. So there are a lot of things. So what parents need to do is that they actually need to analyze that why is the fact that one of my children is not properly behaving vis-a-vis his or her studies? Why are the grades not coming? Where is that thing which is stuck there? So without actually analyzing their mistakes, instead of analyzing the mistakes, instead of finding out where the fault is, what happens is that our parents start actually quarreling and disputing and scolding at their children and calling them and shaming them. So this is the second mistake which our parents do, that they, instead of analyzing where the fault lies, they actually start taunting their children. And of course, as you would imagine, it's totally counterproductive. It has absolutely no significance. It has no value. And the third thing which our parents generally do as a mistake is that they shame their child. So taunting is one thing, shaming is another thing. Now, shaming could be because of a number of ways. They ask questions which embarrass them. For example, did you brush your teeth? Did you sleep early in the night? Have you finished your assignment? Did you have your food? What color are you wearing? Look at the shoes that you're wearing. So these are questions, embarrassing questions, which are totally inadvisable for parents to ask their children. It's like shaming them. It's like putting them to shame. For example, if a child has not brushed his or her teeth, so instead of taking pains and maybe coming closer to him or her to find out what's the problem, you start shaming him or her, you start taunting them for this. Again, this is a bad practice. If you want your child to have good habits, then you have to take some pains. You have to teach those habits when the child is growing up. You see, what happens is when the child is growing up and he and she has a lot of capacity to learn, parents are generally busy with their own schedule, or maybe sleeping or WhatsApping or maybe Facebooking or whatever. But when the time is there for them to be there for the children, at times parents are not there. And when they realize this, things have almost gotten out of hands. So I would say that this practice must be put an end to, that child shaming and embarrassing your children by asking questions which of course would embarrass your child. He has nothing but to say, yes, I did a wrong thing, and cornering him. It has a bad effect on the psyche. It has a very, very debilitating effect. It sort of makes you depressed and dejected because you think that you are a loser, and every question that is being posed to you by your parents is being answered by you in a way that actually makes you admit your own faults. So this is the third thing, I think, as a parent, we would advise every parent not to go and not to adopt this. So the fourth problem which I think children or adults face, young adults of course, when I say children I of course refer to young adults, is that their parents, they actually try to force their own opinions on their children, and their own religious opinions, their own cultural opinions, their own social opinions. You see, when a child is growing up, you can suggest all what you would like to suggest to your children. But once he or she has grown up, you have to realize that mature children are like adults. They are young adults, but they are adults. They are entering adulthood, and they have a right to form an opinion. You should not impose your opinion. You should not force down your own worldview on your children. For example, the type of dress he or she is going to wear, it's her choice, it's his choice. Of course, you can suggest, and you should suggest, that what is the appropriate way of dressing, what is the appropriate way of dealing with strangers or dealing with various members of your community, all sorts of things that you face. Parents do have this prerogative to give an advice to their children. But at the end of the day, the last decision should be left to the child or the adult child himself or herself. Two examples might be relevant here. One of them is that at times our parents force their children to adopt a career of their own choice. I mean, the choice of the parents. So instead of realizing that they need to be closer to their children to find out their aptitude and what is their inclination, and then encouraging their inclination vis-a-vis their profession they should adopt, they force their children that they must become a doctor, they must become an engineer or a chartered accountant or an artist or whatever. Again, they have to realize that this is not a right thing to do. The right thing to do here is that they should help their children in discovering their potential and then encouraging that potential as much as they can, so that children become professionals of the field in which they have that aptitude. And the second mistake which parents make in this regard is that they force their children to marry the way they would like him or her to marry. And they would choose a spouse for their children, for themselves, and then without asking the consent of their children. I'm not saying that all parents do that, but this is what does happen in many Muslim families. Although there have been revisions and there have been betterments, but still we have a long way to go, that when they grow up, they face this dictatorial attitude from their parents, and they are being told off that they have to marry and choose a career of the choice of their parents. And of course, they might have something to say, but at the end of the day, it is not something which is given as a choice to them. The fifth mistake, my dear students, which our parents make vis-a-vis their children, is that they force down religious directives on their children. For example, they would force them, okay, get up for Fajr prayer. Okay, Ramadan is coming now, you must fast. You have to wear a particular dress. Or the fact is that you have to go for the prayer to the mosque, and you must not be slack in this. So this is one example. Other examples, for example, relate to halal food. So they will force their children, okay, you must not go to McDonald's or to KFCs or to Burger Kings, which are non-halal. And I'm not saying this is something that they should not do. What I'm saying is that when they want their children to adopt something, for example, if they want their children not to pray regularly, then instead of forcing them or throwing water on their faces to make them get up for Fajr prayer, what they should do is they should try to make their children understand the reason and the philosophy behind prayer. Why are we required to pray? So this would be a better approach. Instead of just ordering their children to do something, the right way would be to actually tell them the reason why they are being asked to do so. And just to give you one example, because this happens a lot amongst Muslim families, that they force their children to pray, and they say that if we don't force our children to pray, then we will be held accountable before God. So I would like to clarify here that each person is responsible for his own self before the Almighty. It's not the parents who are going to be responsible for what they did or what they did not do. Of course, if they did not do sufficient training in the early part of the childhood of their children, then they are responsible. But once the children grow up, they become young adults, they are answerable to God for whatever they do. If they don't pray, okay, it's their choice, but they should know that they'll be answerable to God, not to their parents. And hence, parents must not force their children. They should just tell them that this is something they must do, and the reason for doing or offering the prayer is such and such. Now, my child, it's up to you whether you want to do it or not, because this is something between you and your God. And to just give you one example so that it may be a little more pertinent to what I'm saying, that since namaz or prayer is something which is discussed the most in our families, and since all of us are forced by our parents at a very early age, especially parents who are religious, that they must be very punctual in their prayer, I think that the philosophy of the prayer, the reason that we have to offer the prayer, should be discussed somewhat in this manner. You see, to give you an example, whenever you have a friend who has given you a gift, what happens? You immediately say thank you to him or her, and your mind, in your mind, you plan that whenever I get the chance, I'll give a better gift to my friend, so that it's like an acknowledgement for the good deed he did to me. So what you do is that you return that gift whenever the time comes, maybe on a birthday or any other occasion. So it's like an immediate acknowledgement. You keep that acknowledgement into your mind and you thank that other person for the good deed or the good gift that he or she gave to you. Now, apply this example to God. So God has given us so many gifts, so many favors that He has done upon us. He has given us home, a shelter, good parents, a nice home to live in, a good car to drive, a good school to go in, and His favors abound. Look at the sun, it shines for us. Look at the moon, it shines for us. The stars, the mountains, the fresh air, everything is like working for us. So it's like thanking, we feel instantaneously that we should thank God for these favors. It's just a question of realizing. It's like realizing that your friend is giving you a gift. If you just hold this analogy with God, so God is giving you these gifts. Whatever you have today, you are a normal human being. You have eyes to see, you have ears to hear. Look at the people who are blind, look at the people who are deaf. So it gives you this sense of gratitude that God has given me something. And as is expected, our immediate reaction should be that I should thank God. Thank you, God, for all that you've done for me. And you know what? The manner in which we have to thank God is this namaz. When we stand up to Him and when we say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and when we kneel before Him, when we prostrate before Him, we are actually saying, thank you, God, for what you've done for me. So if this is, for example, the one area in which I would suggest parents to go about when they are trying to convince their children to pray, they must tell them that this prayer is like remembering God for His gifts, the immense gifts that He has given us. When we are so cautious for a small worldly gift which my friend would give me, if I just realize the gifts that God has given me, I would immediately acknowledge them. So the way to acknowledge the gifts of God is to offer prayer. This is how God has told us that if you want to thank me, of course we just cannot return the gifts. If someone in this world give me a gift, I can give him back that gift or her back the gift. But I cannot return God's favors because there's so much. So the way in which God has told us to thank Him for His favors is to pray before Him, to acknowledge His greatness, and to acknowledge the fact that we are humble human beings who need His support and His help. So this is a fifth area in which our parents make this mistake. And another area, my dear students, in which our parents make this mistake is that even when children grow up, our parents do not learn to what I call, they don't learn to let go. You see, there is this thing called let going of your child. When he grows up, when she grows up, you need to understand that he or she has now become an adult. He or she has now become a person who has his or her own view, and therefore he should be allowed and she should be allowed to live by what he or she has learned. But this doesn't happen. What happens is that instead of allowing him or her to live according to their own wishes, our parents, even when the child has grown up, he's become an adult, maybe an 18-year-old or 20-year-old, even more, they still want him to follow what they think should be right for them. So I think they have to learn to let go. The best gift that they can give to their children is to make them become seekers of the truth. If this is what they can do, if this is a thing that they can engender in their child, that you become a true seeker of the truth, I think their job is done. Because if a child is ingrained with this burning desire that I would like to find what the truth is and abide by the truth, then parents have done their job. They have done their job, because wherever the truth is going to take their children, he or she is going to go with them. And my dear children, I would also like to say one final note here, that another mistake which our parents commit is spying on their children, which is again a bad thing. You spy on your child by sneaking into his room, or maybe looking what he's doing in the room through that lock, or maybe spying on his mobile phone or her mobile phone and keep checking where the message is coming from and what is he or she is doing with that cell phone, or just trying to keep an eye where he or she is going. This is another mistake, and it's very irritating for the child. You see, you have to trust your child. Let him or her do what she thinks is right, even if some bad thing is done. We have to understand that we have our own share of mistakes. All of us do these mistakes. And when we, in our own right, as parents, were young adults, we did the same mistakes. So therefore, If we do something wrong, it is, of course, something which teaches us that it's not the sin which counts. It is basically our attitude after the sin or mistake which counts, that we have to make amends for that. So this is what we should teach our children, that don't be afraid of committing mistakes, because as human beings, mistakes come to us naturally. What is essential is that we must be very careful once we commit a mistake. We should make amends for that. So spying is not a good idea. Spying is not a good idea. It's like developing the intellect of your child, which is a good idea. Let him realize what good and bad is, what good and evil is. And then once you do that, you'll find out that your child would like to get attracted towards good. And finally, my dear viewers, I would like to say that if you ask me what a successful parent is, and who are your successful parents, I would just say one thing, and that is, if our child comes to us directly without going to anyone else after committing a mistake, straight to a parent and telling him or her, that mother or father, today I did this bad thing and I am sorry for that, I'm not going to repeat this thing again. This actually means that the parents have given your children, their children, this confidence that instead of going to somebody else or hiding your mistake, you confess your mistake before your parents, so that they can help them out coming out of this scenario. And a parent is the most successful parent. I would take my hats off to that parent, that if their child comes to them immediately after committing a mistake and tells them that mama or papa, this is what I did today, and I have no place to go but to you. And I have someone, a very anxious parent. Once she came to me, mother of a child, and she said that I'm very annoyed at my child. He's just 15-year-old or 14-year-old, and he has started drinking alcohol. And that lady was living with her in a house, and the annexee of that house, adjacent to their house, her own mother was living. So the child's grandmother was living there. And she said that when her child, 15-year-old son, came home after being drunk, she said, okay, don't enter my home. Just go and sleep into your grandmother's annexee. If you come home like this, I'm not going to accept you as a mother to sleep in my house. And she said, this is going on in my house every now and then. I'm really struggling with my child. And I said to her, if this is what's going on, then actually you need to realize that what has induced your child to go and become a drunkard, why he has taken to this alcohol drinking. And if you turn him out from your house because he's come home drunk, this is no solution. You're going to lose him like this. If you're going to take him off, you're going to scold him, if you're going to be mad at him, he's going to increase and become more rebellious in whatever he's doing. That's not a solution to things. So first realize that you are up with the problem. Yes, 50% of the problem is solved when you realize that you have a problem. And the next 50% is that you, with a cool head, calculate how I'm going to come out of this problem. So these were some of the areas, my dear students, that I would have liked to point it out before you. And I'm sure as young learners, as young adults, you would agree with me that most of these things go on. There are other complaints as well. And now I'm going to ask you that if you could give some feedback on some of the things that I've pointed out, if you think that they are right maybe, or maybe you can add to some of these things. Because remember, the purpose is that these are the complaints that must be very respectfully conveyed to the parents. And don't forget that one day you too will become parents, inshallah. And so therefore you must not repeat these mistakes which perhaps your parents might be committing with you, because it's not going to sort of settle down like that. It's not that when you receive something from the parents, you do the same thing to your own children. No, you must realize if there's some faults which are being committed by their parents, then we must not do the same thing to our own children. So I'm now going to open your mics. Any one of you who could share anything, and let me know if you have some more complaints in this regard that we can add, and maybe one day we can communicate these complaints to our adults as well. So, would you like to share something? So, Ramin, Shanze, Huda, Junaid, Suleiman, any one of you?
could I say something?
Yeah, is that Duran?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, please go ahead.
One thing is that, so my parents are always really worried about what I'll be when I grow up.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if I get, like, so I'm proud of my grades because throughout my life they've been all A's.
Right.
And I do work hard for them. But those few times that I do forget to submit an assignment and it gets a day late and they take off points,
Mm-hmm.
then my mom gets mad because she said he could have gotten 100, but no, you missed points
Mm-hmm.
just because you turned up late. And then
Mm-hmm.
if I failed something and I can only redo it to get to the 70, they get mad.
Right.
They're saying that if you had just paid attention more, you could have
Right.
gotten it better. But I'm telling her that, like, all my averages are above 93%.
Right.
My lowest one right now is 93%.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm telling her that sometimes, like, it's just small things, like it's overall that matters. And so, like, right now she's worried about how my grades will affect me now
Mm-hmm.
when I submit to go to college. But, like, these are preparing you. Mostly in high school and stuff, they count them. So I've been learning from, like, I've been making sure to, like, put it in my calendar whenever an assignment is due and stuff like that.
Okay. Thank you, Nuran. You've shared your problem very well, and I think it's well noted as well. And we'll make it a point to communicate this indirectly, maybe to your parents, so that you're not put to this test again and again in your life. If you're scoring so high, and that you said that the lowest grade that you got is 93%, I think that every parent should be satisfied with such a high achievement. And basically, it is this high achievement which is at times it becomes unhealthy. You see, competition is something which at times becomes very, very testing. And you might have heard that in universities and in colleges, there are these suicide rates which have become very high. And one of the reasons for this is that there is a lot of pressure on students. There is a lot of pressure, a lot of unhealthy competition which goes on between students, and a lot of pressure is exerted by the parents that they must have high grades. And such is this pressure that at times students wilt under this pressure, and what happens is that they end up by ending their own lives, which is, of course, such a pathetic and such a heinous thing. And parents don't realize that when they put this pressure on their children, how it affects them, and how, as it is, they have many other pressures. They have peer pressure, they have their classrooms and their colleagues and their teachers to deal with. And then here comes along a parent that instead of empathizing with them, instead of looking more deeply into the issues that they are facing, they start criticizing them to become even more high achievers than they have. And as I said, this is one of the problems which we often face. And of course, as I said, they end up in such traumatic situations as suicides or just children becoming renegades or rebellious from studies, and they just give up studying. So thank you for that, Nuran. It's well acknowledged. So anyone else, Hassan or Haris, would you like to share something?
Every parent want their kids to get good grades, like perfect grades.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we complaining about our parents then? Because, like, everybody's parents do that.
Yeah, actually, what happens is that when that pressure mounts, what happens is it shatters the confidence of the child. You see, expecting something from your child is very good, but when you over expect something, or when you persistently scold your child for not getting high grades, you see, instead of analyzing that why my son or daughter is not getting high grades, what you do is you start ticking off your child, you start scolding him or her. It does no good to their psyche. So you see, a parent has to realize and analyze that why is my child not faring well? Is it because I'm putting undue pressure on him? Is it because there is something wrong with the teacher? Is it because there is something wrong in the teaching methodology? So these are the things which parents should actually try to go into. Because you see, every child wants to fare well. It's only they lose interest in their studies because of the fact that they think that at times the teacher is not doing well, at times the subject is not interesting to them, and at times they feel this attention deficiency disorder, which of course is something that plagues many of the youngsters. So there are antidotes, there are remedies for this, and children and parents must do well in studying these things. And I think I do often suggest that as parents we must study the subject of child psychology, in which we are taught that how we should deal with young adults, how we should deal with their problems, and if they are not achieving what they should achieve, how is it that we can correct them. So thank you for that. Okay, Ramin and Huda, if you would like to share something regarding some of these genuine issues, and if you think that some of the issues which I raised, would you agree with them, or would you say that maybe they are overemphasized?
So far I agree. I don't know what to do when a parent, they want us to be something when we grow up, but we don't know what we want to be.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I don't know.
So that's one of the things that we discussed, that if we would not like our parent to force us to become what we don't want to become, how should we deal with such a parent? Because you see, parents are very persistent, they are very adamant, and they have already chosen for you what perhaps you would not like to do. And this is one of the areas in which coaching must be done towards the parents, and they must be told that this is something which is entirely the choice of their child, because he's going or she's going to live a life, and if you force something on him or her, it's not going to work very well, and the child is bound to end up as a failure because you're forcing something on which that child is not satisfied. I have seen so many children losing up, or maybe just faring very badly in their studies, in their careers, simply because they were pushed into doing something which they never wanted to. And as I said, this is a mistake which our adults do make, which parents do make, and they must realize that this they should not do. Okay, Junaid, would you like to share your view?
No.
Okay. So anyone else would like to say something? Faiz or Suleiman, Alina, Sameed, anything that you think is something that we would like to suggest the parents to revise in their attitude, because this is something which bothers a lot of our children, and we would not like them to remain under stress. As it is, there are a number of stresses that they go through.
I have something else.
Okay, Nuran, please go ahead.
I don't like it when like a lot of adults and parents do this.
Mm-hmm.
They assume that they know what their child wants.
Okay.
They just assume that this is what the child wants. This is how they should live their life. When like I feel like the only people who really understand kids are kids.
Right.
Because sure, everybody was once a kid, but then times change. Our childhood is much different than the adults' childhoods.
Right.
So they just assume we want all these things, all this. We want to have good grades. We want to focus on this when we really don't. And I don't like it when my parents underestimate the value of technology. Like, they think that it's just like a distraction when it can really help you.
Right.
So yeah.
So very rightly, Nuran, I think you've done a very good job in pointing this out, that at times parents don't realize that a lot of electronic gadgets, they help us in studying and they help us in our own studies, and it's not always that they are a cause of distraction. It's just a matter of keeping a balanced attitude when you're using these gadgets. Of course, things like social media, or maybe your iPad or other things which actually become an addiction, if they are used in a balanced way, of course, the parents would not object to. But perhaps one of the concerns of the parents is that children, they become excessive in this use, and they actually forsake some of the other responsibilities that they have. And instead of concentrating perhaps more on their studies or other responsibilities, children end up doing these activities to a very extreme, and that, of course, badly affects their studies and some of the other areas in which they should be more responsible. So I think you have to analyze both sides. One is the parental outlook, because parents are, of course, well-wishers, but the wrong thing which parents perhaps do is that they impose these restrictions in a way without realizing that there is a lot of advantage to be gauged from these gadgets also. And the right thing they can perhaps be given this lenience, this concession, is that when they see that their child is over addicted to these things, then of course it becomes a sort of a sore thing in their minds. And this is not just with these gadgets. It does the same. The same thing happens when you do something to an extreme, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whether it's anything else which actually holds your attention. Right. Okay. Anyone else that who would like to share these things that should be ultimately communicated to our parents? Faiz, would you like to say something? Okay, if you finish your work regarding these previous exercises, one thing that I'd like to stress here, I've already been doing that earlier on, and this is, of course, something which is different from the topic that we are discussing, and that is that all of us need to reevaluate our aptitudes. We need to reevaluate our inner talents and our abilities, because you see, all of us are born with some talent or the other. And I've seen all of you, Alina, Ijaz, Sameed, Nurain, all of you, Faiz, Haris, you have abilities, you have your own positive points and perhaps your strengths and your weaknesses. So what needs to be done is that you have to work on your strengths and you have to work on your weaknesses. So a good thing is that if you take out a piece of paper, maybe even a laptop or a computer or an iPad, and open up a file, make two files. One of them you should write down your strengths, that what am I good at? And the other file you should write down your weaknesses, what I am bad at. This is thing I cannot do. I have a lot of fear. I get angry a lot. I lose concentration. It's hard for me to concentrate. So these are some of the things that you might be missing. And then there are other things which are your strengths. So if you want to improve yourself, my suggestion would be that you make this list. You'll write down your strengths on one page maybe or in one file, and you write down your weaknesses which you think are your weaknesses. You see, there are some weaknesses which others might think are your weaknesses, but you don't acknowledge them. So I'm not talking about those weaknesses. I'm talking about those weaknesses about which I am convinced, yes, I have this weakness. So on the other file, you write down your weaknesses. Now, the proper way to go about improving yourself is that when you have these strengths written, for example, you're a good writer, you've got a good speaker, or that you're a person who can resolve issues, you're a person who can be depended upon, you're a person who's responsible, you're a person to whom people would come for their problems to get solved, you're a person who is kind, so see, these are all your positive points. So when you write these down and you make a list of them, it will give you confidence in life. It will give you that self-confidence, and it will boost your self-esteem, because you'll see that this is how I have fared so far in life. These are my strengths, and this will give you the encouragement to move ahead with these strengths. And then you look at your weaknesses, and when you see your weaknesses, be very fair, very honest. You don't have to share your weaknesses with others. You have to share them with your own self. And the purpose is that once you see your weaknesses, you get that urge, okay, I'm going to overcome my weakness. I'm going to become a better person. I'm going to give up being angry. I'm going to give up being lazy. I'm going to give up being a person who is not responsible. So these are the things that if you write down on the other file and make a list of them, and one by one you start practicing. You see, practice makes perfect, is that golden thing. These weaknesses are not going to go away immediately. They are going to go away very slowly. They are going to go away by your own effort. So you have to realize that if you have to overcome your weakness, no one else but you yourself is the person who should have this urge that I'm going to overcome my weakness. And do it one by one. And start with the easiest, the thing that you can do the best. If you have a small weakness, place it on top. So I would say that when you write your weaknesses, write them in ascending order. The smallest weakness on the top, then the bigger one, and then the next bigger one. And then start off by making this commitment every day before going to bed. Okay, this is the thing that I'm going to improve the next day. And let me tell you, it's not going to happen the very next day, because habits take time to change. It's not a on-off button that today you make a commitment and tomorrow that commitment stands honored. It's not going to work like that. In fact, the more you make a commitment, the more there are chances that you will not be able to honor it the very next day. Because you see, as I said, habits, bad habits especially, they take time to go away. So don't get frustrated. Never get frustrated if you are not being able to overcome your weaknesses. Because you see, as I said, it's a slow process. But if you do it continuously, if you do it regularly, inshallah, there is this strong chance that one day you'll be able to overcome them. And always remember, the effort is the thing that counts the most. If you give enough effort, if you apply enough effort, this is the thing which counts. Because at the end of the day, God is going to ask, how much effort did you put in? How hard did you work to overcome your weaknesses? Whether you overcame them or not is another question. But did you try hard enough or not? So if you try hard enough, your job is done. So these were some of the areas, my dear students, that I wanted to talk to you about. And since we are now departing for a winter break, inshallah, we will be seeing each other next year on the 6th of January. These 2 weeks will be off weeks because of these winter holidays. But before I end, if anyone would like to make a comment, I will be happy to receive any comments or anything that you would have to say regarding what we've discussed today.